In 387, Rome was sacked by the Senones, a migrating Gallic tribe. This pivotal episode in Roman history nearly saw the Republic destroyed and instilled in the Romans a pathological fear and hatred of migrating hordes, a characteristic that had not faded in the slightest by the 110s BC. So as the Germanic Cimbri tribe approached Roman territory, tensions were high. Beginning their migration near modern-day Denmark, the Cimbri slowly wound their way through Central Europe and eventually found themselves in the lands of the Cherusci, who were understandably unhappy at the sight of huge hordes rocking up on their doorstep, and requested help from a Roman governor named Gnaeus Papirius Carbo. Seeing an easy path to glory, Carbo was eager to oblige. He initially acted friendly, entering into talks with the Cimbri, but he secretly prepared to ambush them as they passed through an alpine passage. Despite his advantageous position, Carbo's 30,000 army was found out, overwhelmed and annihilated by the huge Cimbric wave. 6,000 Roman survivors, Carbo among them, trudged back to safety. Carbo would pay dearly for his failure, and when he returned he was prosecuted and soon committed suicide. The Cimbrian activity in the aftermath of the battle is murky, but they didn't entangle themselves with the Romans for 4 more years, when they eventually wound up in southern Gaul, near the Roman province of Narbonensis. In response, Consul Marcus Junius Silvanus marched north with an army to square off with the Germans. When the armies had drawn closer to each other, the Cimbri sent envoys to Silvanus, asking for some land to settle on, but he was having none of it, and simply told the Cimbri to get lost. This typically Roman style of diplomacy did not win over any of the Cimbri, and soon enough a battle broke out. Details are scarce, but we know that the Cimbri won another crushing victory. This opened the way to Italy, but the Cimbri had no desire to engage in a grueling war with the Republic. They had made themselves abundantly clear to Silvanus. They were just looking for a place to settle down. But once war with the Romans had begun, it would not stop until their enemies were utterly destroyed or reduced to servitude. The Cimbri moved north once again, but the damage they had done to Roman prestige remained. Many Gallic tribes, formerly awed by the Roman strength, now began to pillage Roman lands. In 107, the year Marius became consul, his colleague Lucius Cassius Longinus led another army north to stop the Turingi tribe that had thundered through southern Gaul. But he was led into an ambush and slaughtered. 3 legions escaped after being humiliated into walking under the yoke. 3 armies had been sent north to face the barbarians, and the Romans had suffered 3 humiliating defeats. But the Romans refused to give up, and the wars rumbled on. 106 saw Consul Quintus Servius Caepio travel north to rectify the situation. Spoiler alert, he wouldn't. He spent 106 not doing much aside from illegally plundering huge amounts of gold, and then, in 105, the Cimbri returned once again. Caepio had his command extended, while another consul was sent north with another army. Between them they had 60 to 80,000 men, split roughly equally between them. Rome was only able to field so many troops due to recently having removed property restrictions for service in the legions. With so many men under their command, the Romans should have been able to win, but almost immediately problems began to surface. Gaius Marius, the consul who had just marched north, was a novus homo, and so was scorned by Caepio despite being a higher rank than him. So Caepio refused to defer his command to Marius and claimed to be acting independently. The Roman forces were effectively split in 2. When the Cimbri came into range of the armies, Caepio refused to join their forces together and marched out to a position between the armies in an attempt to win all the glory for himself. But in this act he fatally underestimated the size of the Cimbri, who numbered in the hundreds of thousands, and his army was scattered and crashed into Malleus's lines, who was then in turn destroyed. Both Caepio and Malleus survived, but almost all of the Romans who fought that day had been slaughtered. A disaster comparable in scope only to Cannae. Once again, the Cimbri refused to march on Italy, instead moving west for the time being. But the fear on the streets of Rome could not be stopped. The Romans turned to their last hope, the returning war hero from Numidia, Gaius Marius. The prestige he gained from the war in Numidia had not faded, and in 104, Marius was elected consul in absentia for the second time. Technically, his consulship was illegal, since there was supposed to be a gap of 10 years between holding the office, but the people didn't care, and his election went ahead anyway. In January of that year, Marius held a massive triumph to celebrate the defeat of Jugurtha, but with the catastrophic news from Gaul still fresh on his mind, he did not linger in Rome for long. He was faced with the problem of Rome not actually having an army, since most of the northern legions had been destroyed at Arausio, while his Numidian legions had been left behind in a peacekeeping effort. It was while raising his new legions that Marius implemented many of the reforms for which he is known. He reduced the Roman baggage train as much as possible, and decreed that every soldier must now carry all the equipment he needed to set up a camp, decreeing that every soldier must now carry his own supplies on his back, while changing the Roman equipment in other places. This improved the manoeuvrability of the Roman army considerably. 104 passed without so much as a skirmish in the north, but the Cimbri were still out there, and Marius was elected for an almost unheard of third consulship in 6 years. It was the first consecutive consulship in over 100 years, but the Roman people did not trust anyone else to guard the north. He spent his time rebuilding alliances with the Gallic tribes in preparation for the time the Cimbri returned. However, the Cimbri had not done much returning for 2 years now, and the state of emergency began to fade. Marius worried that his hold on the consulship might fade with it, so he formed an alliance of necessity with a young firebrand named Saturninus. Saturninus was a firm populare, and tribune of the plebs for 103. He attempted to build a power base for himself by pushing forward a law which granted land in Numidia to Marius's veterans. This simultaneously put him in Marius's good books, so the two came together to ensure Marius's re-election for 102. In an act of carefully crafted stage play, Marius told the Senate that he would not be standing for the elections in 102, prompting Saturninus to rise to his feet and proclaim Marius a traitor for abandoning the Republic during her time of need. This worked like a charm, and Marius became consul for the 4th time. It was just as well because the Cimbri returned once again, joined this time by the Tigurini and other North Germanic tribes. Marius learned that the Germanic peoples were planning a two-pronged invasion of Italy. The Teutones, Ambrones and Tigurini went west, and the Cimbri themselves went east. The western prong would be faced by Marius, or the eastern division would be slowed by Marius's consular colleague Quintus Lutatius Catulus. As Marius heard of the Germanic army approaching him, he dug into a heavily fortified position on the Rhone. The tribes approached his camp, but when they saw his defensive position and fortifications, they attempted to draw him out with jeers and mockery. The Romans were eager to punish the barbarians, but Marius paid them no heed. The Romans would wait. Eventually, the barbarians got tired of waiting and tried to assault the Roman fort, but the strength of the fortifications and the discipline of the Romans meant that the barbarians were easily driven back with many casualties. Eventually, the barbarians got tired of dying and marched towards the town of Aquae Sextiae. Once they had left, Marius ordered the camp to be dismantled and shadowed the Germanic movements, waiting for an opening. He didn't have to wait long. For whatever reason, the Ambrones tribe had encamped separately from the rest of their allies, leaving them more vulnerable. One day, a Roman foraging party stumbled upon some Ambrones bathing in the Rhone. The Ambrones in the river asked for help from the Ambrone camp, and the commotion soon brought some of Marius's auxiliary forces to the scene. Soon, a battle broke out between the auxiliaries and the Ambrones. Marius quickly organised his main force and smashed into the Ambrones, who were unready for a fight, and the Romans ripped through them with terrifying efficiency. Marius had around 37,000 men, while the Ambrones had 30,000, all now dead, with Marius suffering only minor casualties. Marius was far from done though, as 100,000 other Germanic warriors were still encamped further along the plain. 4 days later, Marius brought most of his army atop a hill, while hiding 3,000 other men in a nearby forest. The Germanic peoples were furious at the slaughter of their brethren, so when they saw the Romans they recklessly charged uphill. Marius had the terrain and the better troops, but the Germanic peoples had the numbers. The battle raged fiercely and evenly, until Marius sprung his trap and the Romans in the forest charged into the Germanic rear, shattering them and slaughtering their tightly packed troops. As many as 100,000 people died that day, with many women and children committing suicide after the battle. One prong of the invasions had been destroyed, but the Cimbri themselves had a much better time against Catulus in the east, and had pushed his far smaller force beyond the Alps. At long last, the Cimbri were in Italy, Soon they defeated Catullus's legions in battle, but in 101 Marius returned and was elected to his 5th consulship. Following this defeat, the Roman armies reunited south of the Po River, and Marius spent time gathering more troops to his side. By the time he crossed the Po in spring of 101, he had 50,000 troops at his back. The Cimbri initially sent envoys to Marius, asking for Rome to hand over land in Cisalpine Gaul, and warned him that soon their allies would cross the Alps in the west to support them. Marius laughed at this, and ordered the kings of the Teutones tribe paraded in front of the ambassadors. Shocked and enraged at the news of their brethren's death, they left Marius's camp soon after. The Romans and the Cimbri lined up for battle at a place called the Raudian Plains. Marius commanded the left flank of the army, Catulus commanded the centre, and Sulla was on the right. While we're talking about him, Sulla had served Marius as a military tribune for the first years of the war, but for some reason in 102 he requested to be transferred to the legions of Catulus. Exactly why Sulla asked for this is unknown, but it could have been another symptom of a widening gap between Marius and Sulla. Opposite the Romans stood more than 100,000 Cimbric warriors, 15,000 of which were cavalry. The Romans were content to let the Cimbri come to them, and held their ground. The Cimbri were marching into the sun and the wind, and the movement of men on both sides kicked up huge dust storms that smothered the battlefield and impaired vision. The Cimbri may have started with a frontal cavalry charge, which was driven back by the Romans and caused confusion in the main bulk of the Cimbric infantry. Soon the two lines clashed and Catulus fought with dogged determination. Sensing an opportunity, Marius may have led a flanking force through one of the dust storms and emerged on the Cimbrian flank. Sulla and Catulus fought fiercely further down the lines, and then Marius came crashing into the Cimbrian flank. Soon the battle became a rout, and then the rout became a slaughter. Apparently, the Cimbri women killed their own warriors as they fled before killing their children and then themselves. More than 100,000 Cimbri had died that day, and those who escaped the slaughter were enslaved. The war was over, and Marius was bathed in glory as the saviour of Rome. His victories had catapulted him to the heights of glory in Rome, and not long after the battle, he was hailed as the 3rd founder of Rome, raising him to the rank of the Republic's most sacred heroes, Romulus and Camillus. For his own part in the victory, Sulla also rose in popularity and prestige. Now at the apex of his power, Marius returned home in triumph for a second time. However, all was not well in Rome, and the ageing Marius would soon find himself embroiled in the bloody power politics of the capital. All the while, troubles brewed both at home and abroad, as Sulla and Marius grew further and further apart, until a Roman army marched on Rome for the first time.